This is a video response to Once Forgiven, Now Free. His publication is Atheist's Morality or Lack Thereof. So, let's get going. Once Forgiven, take it over. Oh, real quick, he opens up with a warning. This video may contain evidence which challenges your worldview. Closed-minded people are advised. Thank you. Appreciate that.
The God Delusion, Chapter 2. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty, ethnic cleanser, and the list goes on and on. This is Richard Dawkins' view of God. This sentence is loaded with moral language. And so, here's something Douglas Wilson said. When someone says something, look at their feet. In other words, when someone says something from their mouth, look at what they're standing on. Does the worldview that they accept, can it make sense of what they're saying? See, whenever someone makes a moral judgment, they need a moral framework in order to make that judgment from. In order to...
Nope. I apologize, I'm stopping you here. I hate to interrupt you during your rhythm, but I don't think that I'm going to make you lose your stride because you're in here. But in all fairness, I'm going to back up a few seconds on you. That way there'll be no confusion when you pick up. Moral framework is a social one. And until you can prove otherwise, there's going to be a good chunk of us who are going to believe that. If it was otherwise, then moralities would all be the same throughout the existence of mankind, as well as mimicked completely in its entirety all over the globe. There would have been no moral issues with, we'd all be stoning people to death or not. It would be all or none. And it would be viewed the same way all over the world. Like I said to Jesus freak, where's your slave? It used to be morally acceptable. Now, your social upbringing says otherwise. Not the Bible. Continuing.
Framework in order to make that judgment from. In order to label something as unjust, you need to have a definition, a moral framework that tells you what is just and what is unjust. So let's look at Richard Dawkins' moral framework.
Okay.
This is from his book Out of Eden on page 133. He says, "There is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music." So that's what Richard Dawkins says. He says there is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. So where does this moral language come from? He calls God unjust, but does that sound like blind, pitiless indifference? What's wrong with Richard Dawkins' worldview here?
Wait a minute.
Richard Dawkins has done here is he's borrowing from the worldview in order to argue against it.
Hold on.
DNA.
Hold on. Let's see what he said, and not what you pretended he said. Okay? Let's play that back again.
Neither knows nor cares.
Wait,
Richard
what was it?
Dawkins' moral framework. This is from his book Out of Eden.
Okay.
On page 133. He says,
133.
"There is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor... There is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA neither knows nor cares.
One more time.
DNA just is. DNA neither knows nor cares.
Okay.
DNA just is.
That's what I thought you
dance
said.
to its music."
Okay.
So that's what Richard Dawkins says. He says there is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. So where does this moral language come from? He calls God unjust, but does that sound like blind, pitiless indifference?
You are a dishonest person. Okay. You're trying to bend your own argument. You said Richard Dawkins says, and we had you repeat that. DNA doesn't care or blah 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 blah. It is indifferent. Are you saying that God is DNA? Is that what you're saying?
Does that sound like blind, pitiless indifference?
For DNA, yes.
What's wrong with Richard Dawkins' worldview here? What Richard Dawkins has done here is he's borrowing from the Christian worldview in order to.
The Christian worldview, as far as like morals, borrowed it from the religions that existed before it, from the social environment, and that's all there is to it. And you don't have the means nor the resources to actually prove otherwise. But, funny enough, there is the means and resources to prove and back up what I just said.
Argue against it. He can't make sense of morality from his own worldview. He can't.
No, you see, here's the thing. We're already seeing that you're having a lack of understanding where you jump from DNA to God. And you made it seem like that it was Dawkins who made the error. And that was you.
Make moral judgments. He can't label something as good or evil from his worldview. And he's admitted it too. But then
Where did he admit that? Let's see. Show us.
He turns around and he starts calling God evil and unjust. Richard Dawkins has to assume that God exists in order to argue against it.
No, he doesn't. The idea for a made-up being, when you base your feelings on the content of their character, okay? You following along? Show of hands, how many of you here believe in Gollum from the Lord of the Rings? Now, how many are you going to call him evil? That he was corrupted by the ring and he was evil. Okay? He's calling your God, the character of the God, of your Bible, God, the character, evil. Okay? He doesn't have to believe in him. Just like I don't have to believe Gollum is real. You follow?
And he has to assume Christian morality in order to throw accusations at him.
Oh.
Richard Dawkins is just arbitrarily throwing up his worldview, what he thinks is right and wrong, based on whatever he feels like. He just makes up the definition of unjust to be whatever he wants it to be. It's just his opinion. You can't just make this stuff up. If atheism is true, and there is no evil and no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference, then this sentence from the God delusion would make no sense at all. It wouldn't make any sense. The fact that that sentence makes sense is evidence that there is a God. Right? Richard Dawkins can't get any traction from his own worldview. His worldview tells him that there is no good, no evil. But if that's the case, then he can't argue against God. And so he has to use Christian presuppositions in order to...
Your Christian presuppositions are borrowed from social presuppositions there, bud. Oh. I'm just going to drop the link on my page. Whoever wants to go and watch, go for it. I've already debunked him. I've already showed that he is incompetent for an argument like this, that he bounces back and forth with his stuff. He makes a direct comparison when Dawkins is talking about DNA being indifferent, and then he goes straight to God and then makes it seem like the claim was for the same for both. Dude, you're done. Somehowmagic. I'll talk to y'all later.